Shalom, Holocaust 2008. Every year there are new findings about the Holocaust, which is interesting considering it's happened 60 years ago, and yet new things occur which have to be reported and discussed. At the same time, they deal with some age-old issues. I want to talk about what's happened, a few things about the Holocaust in 2008 as the Jewish people and the world mourn over this most awful event in human history. Well, first of all, there's an interesting story about a Torah that was buried in the cemetery in Auschwitz shortly before the Nazis invaded. And the story was known, it was told to people, but no one ever found the Torah. And finally, some of the pieces went to a Catholic priest who lived in the area, who was actually born Jewish and survived the Holocaust, and as a child was converted into a Christian family. And he held on to most of it. And part of it was buried in a metal case in the cemetery. People knew, but no one knew how to find it. And finally, some rabbi went with a metal detector, and he still couldn't find it. Now, you'd think, because of all the coffins in the cemetery, it would bing, bing, bing. But those were Jews, and in those days, certainly, and still many Jews today, use only wood in the coffins. But then his son suggested maybe the cemetery was a different size in those days. And sure enough, they went online and found the cemetery was much bigger. So he went back, and he binged, and he found the Torah in a metal case. Then he put an ad in the paper saying, does anyone have any Jewish handwritten documents? And the priest knew what it was being looked for, and he came forward with the other 4 panels, and they put the Torah together. And now they found this Torah that had been buried in the Auschwitz cemetery where over 3 million Jews were murdered. And it says at the end of the article, this is really an opportunity to look up to the heavens and say, who laughs last, laughs best, Rabbi Euless said. The Nazis really thought that they had wiped the Jews off the face of the earth in Judaism. Here we take this ultimate symbol of hope and of Judaism and rededicating it and using it in a synagogue. We take it to Auschwitz. You can't beat that. Really remarkable story. Torah, this ultimate symbol of the Jewish people, revived from the literal ashes of Auschwitz. A second story has to do with a documentary that was recently found. Evidently, there were some photographs of SS officers that were found by an American soldier during the war and recently released. It was made into a documentary called The Auschwitz Albums. And what's amazing about it, it describes really the banality of evil. Here are these SS officers who would go in during the day and murder thousands of Jews and go home and have barbecues and picnics and laugh with their friends. And the film by Eric Nelson tells of a scrapbook containing 116 photographs taken in the spring of '44. It was the personal album of an SS officer found by an American Army officer after the war. Rare images of the death camp staff at play. They looked like really nice guys, except during the day they'd mass murder thousands and thousands of Jews. The banality of evil, just recently discovered. Then there's an issue that's not new, except the anniversary comes every year, and that's the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto. And this year we commemorated the 65th anniversary of the seminal event. As the forward editorial said, it was the tiny band of Polish Jews, teenagers and young adults, armed mostly with pistols and gasoline bombs, launched a hopeless counterattack against the massed forces of the German army. The Nazi SS had chosen that day to enter the ghetto. The resistant fighters, members of the city's Zionist and socialist youth groups, decided that if they must die, they would go down fighting and force the world to remember them. And so it juxtaposes the fact that this was Passover, saying, on Passover we're reminded each year of the ancient commandment passed on to every generation to view ourselves as we personally had been freed from Egyptian bondage. Today, one full lifetime after 1943, the Passover commandment gains a new layer of meaning. We're obliged to view ourselves as if we personally stood in the rubble of the ghetto, but with a single choice remaining, whether or not to seize our own destiny and leave a legacy of honor for the generations yet to come. Warsaw Ghetto, commemorated each year. But this is the 65th anniversary. And one final piece, in Israel every year, they commemorate the Holocaust, and there's a siren, everybody stops, and just stops for a moment and does nothing. And this year, Israel's president made the logical leap to Iran. He charged that the world woke up too late to eliminate the threat of Adolf Hitler before he started a war that killed 60 million people. And what was the world doing today while Iran amasses bombs? Israel had to destroy a Syrian nuclear reactor. What were they going to do with the bombs? And Iran's clearly making bombs, and working towards making bombs. What's the world doing? Nothing. Letting them go ahead, while they clearly say they want to destroy Israel. And so as we think about all of these events, the question is what to do about it. Continue to fight evil, resist evil that exists in the world. But I want to tell you one human interest story that occurred also this week that I think helps us understand what we can do, because I'm recording this the week in which the Jewish people read the Parsha of Kedoshim, Leviticus, the middle of Leviticus, and it has probably the most important chapter ever written in human history, Leviticus 19, with three of the most important words, Ve'ahavta re'acha kamocha, love thy neighbor as thyself. It has many other great mitzvot, including Lo tamod al dam re'acha, don't stand idly by while the blood of your neighbor is spilled. And if there's anything in human history that stands in sharp contrast to these two mitzvot, love thy neighbor as thyself, and don't stand idly by while the blood of your neighbor is spilled, it's the Nazi horror. Excuse me. And there's one little story that, of course, pales in significance to the Holocaust, but it does teach us about a little lighting candle in the darkness. There's a story about a softball game, and this college woman hit what appeared to be a 3-run homer, and as she rounded the base, she looked back and twisted her foot, and she crumpled to the ground and could not get up. Now, the rules are that if your own team touches you, you can't advance. She would not be credited with this home run. And she didn't know what to do because nobody knew what to do because she couldn't move. And then the coach of the opposing team said, well, does anybody mind if we help her? And so two members of the opposing team lifted her up and carried her around the bags and lowered her down each base so she could touch the bag as the rules require so she could get credit for her home run. And the coach said, she hit it over the fence, she deserved it. Anybody would have done it. I just beat them to it. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And so as we think about the Holocaust, the mass murder of over 6 million Jews, the cumulative murder of many millions more of other people by the Nazis in 2008, we think about the banality of evil, these SS albums. We think about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. We think about this Torah, found and being repaired, that was buried deep in the Holocaust Auschwitz cemetery. Shalom.